Good morning from the US East Coast. I am Rudabe Shahid, a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council's South Asia Center. It is my honor and privilege to moderate this event titled Rising Sea Level and Climate Crisis in Bangladesh, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka. According to the World Bank, during the past decade, almost 700 million people, about half of South Asia's population, were affected by climate-related disasters. In 2018, World Bank predicted that there will be nearly 40 million climate migrants in South Asia by 2050. Bangladesh, the Maldives, and Sri Lanka have many low-lying areas, which are among the first regions in the world to bear the brunt of climate change due to rising sea levels. Today, the South Asia Center brings together a panel of experts to discuss the effects of climate change on the economy, food, and energy security, and migration in the three countries. Without further ado, I will now introduce our guests and proceed to our discussion. First, we have with us Dr. Ataullah Rashid, doctoral researcher from Australian National University, Canberra, Australia. Thank you for joining us. Second, we are joined by Dr. Asanka Vijayasinghe, research fellow, Institute of Policy Studies, Colombo, Sri Lanka. Thank you. Next, we have with us Ms. Sirazum Munira Silvi, Program Officer, Climate Vulnerability Program, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Thank you, Ms. Silvi. Lastly, we have with us Dr. Kumar Biswajit Devnath, Research Associate, Hub for Biotechnology in Built Environment, Newcastle University in the UK. So we're all in different time zones, and thank you everybody for joining us. First of all, we start off with a general discussion about where we are at this point in time. And I will first go over to Dr. Rashid. So Dr. Rashid, rising sea level in the Indian Ocean is expected to bring all of the Maldives underwater by the turn of the century. In 2009, former President Mohammad Nasheed held the world's first underwater cabinet meeting in a symbolic cry for help. What kind of framework is there for the Maldives to deal with this issue? And what more can be done to address the impact of climate change? Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to be part of this important conversation today. But first, as I do my introduction, I would like to reflect my presence here in Australia by acknowledging the Ngunnawal people, the traditional owners of the land on which I'm residing and working. So I have worked in the Maldives public service for over 16 years and mostly in diplomatic and foreign service in the area of sustainability and climate-related issues in small island states. My current work focuses on developing research around international politics and climate security in small island developing states. So to go to your point, I think there are a few things that I like to highlight about Maldives. That is a country with a small population ranging just about 500,000 people, and is a resource-dependent economy based on infrastructure depending on low-lying islands. So in the Maldives case, there are a number of issues that's been affected by climate change and the impact of climate security. So the focus and the government policy mostly focuses on development and achieving sustainability and resilience in the economies. So as today's focus of the topic, I would like to highlight that there is a strong link between how government deals with development and development programs and climate security to the type of adaptation and mitigation work that's been done in the local communities. So as a starter, I also like to highlight that there's been a lot of work done in the international space that actually reflects on what government does right now in the local infrastructure development projects that actually supports climate security in the Maldives. So to summarily explain what policy looks like or what we are doing is something very much closely related to the development programs we run in the country. So as we go forward, I would try to explain further on these topics and points. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rashid, and thanks for that overview. And now we head over to Dr. Vijay Singh, joining us from Sri Lanka. So, Dr. Vijay Singh, Sri Lanka is currently facing acute food shortages, with the agricultural sector having taken a massive hit due to the COVID-19 pandemic. In the coming years, how will climate change and global warming compound this matter? And what can be done to offset the economic impact of climate change? Thank you. Dr. Vijay Singh, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, Dr. Shahid, thank you very much for the question. Actually, right now, Sri Lanka food situation is not characterized by acute shortage, but there is high food inflation. Food inflation is about 40% right now. It is caused by about three factors. One was the macroeconomic policies followed by the government. The pre-pandemic tax cuts, it created a drain on the revenue. The revenue loss was estimated about 500 billion Sri Lanka rupees. So as a result of that, government had to borrow excessively from the central bank. We call this as money printing. So it was a factor, this food price increase. The other one was with the COVID pandemic. Our key foreign exchange sources like tourism and remittances dried up. As a result of that, the reserve level went down drastically. That created a pressure on Sri Lanka rupee. About several weeks ago, we had to float Sri Lanka rupee because it was not possible to defend it through market operations. Then the exchange rate is skyrocketed, and we import a lot of commodities like fuel, wheat, and you know, when fuel price increases, everything goes up. So it's another factor. The third was, as you said, the productivity loss due to poor agricultural policies in COVID time. As an example, Sri Lanka government tried to go 100% organic and banned chemical fertilizers. That hit the major staple cultivation, which is rice. Industries also say that the yield loss is about 30%. So in the next question is how climate change will compound this crisis. In the long run, there are three channels that climate change increase this burden. One is the productivity loss of food crops. There are simulations done by the crop scientists. We have two agroclimatic regions in Sri Lanka. One is the wet zone, and the other thing is the dry zone. And there are two seasons, rainy season and the dry season. In the rainy season, it is expected that by 2050 in wet zone, the yield loss can be about 18% in rice. And in 2100, it can be about 31%. Similarly, in a dry zone, a yellow season, that means the dry season, the yield loss can be about 42% in 2100. So it's a huge loss, and major calorie source is rice. So Sri Lankan people will be affected by that. And the productivity loss of plantation crops is another concern. As an example, we export a lot of tea to the world market. It is expected that 30 to 80 kilogram per hectare yield loss can be expected due to the climate change. Then our revenue export revenue will go down. The third avenue is the impact on aggregate output. It is expected that about 6% of output will be reduced due to the climate change. So this will affect our food security situation. About the measures, it is important to mitigate these measures and adaptation. To mitigate, we have to channel funds to the producers and consumers who are affected by this. And we need to improve the agricultural productivity, domestic productivity, especially rice. And we have to introduce market-based instruments like crop insurance to safeguard the producers. Finally, it is important to do trade integration, because computable general equilibrium models have shown that in an integrated world, this welfare effect is much less than in isolated conditions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vijay Singhe. And Sri Lanka, of course, has been in the news, and thank you for giving us that overview. And next we go to Miss Sylvie. And Bangladesh has experienced frequent cyclones and flooding in the course of its history. It appears over the years, the country has come up with various adaptation strategies. For example, a model town in the southern region of Mongla was developed to provide employment and accommodation for those affected by climate change. So, Ms. Sylvie, can you tell us what additional measures can be taken to deal with an increased rate of global warming and sea level rise? Thank you.
Sure, thank you, Rudabeh, for that question. Firstly, I really want to focus on the fact that climate change and the impacts, especially on the countries that are least responsible for causing it, is facing a triple injustice framework in that sense, because countries like Bangladesh is least responsible for causing it in the first place. They're the nano emitters of the greenhouse gases, and which in turn causes it to be, the countries which are hardest hit, and they are also vulnerable people are hardest to reach in these countries. And thirdly, they also have least resources to come up with these adaptation strategies. So that makes it very important for a comprehensive measure for the government, the private sector, and all the stakeholders to come and play together a role that is in line and pro-poor solution for these people. I was just interested that, we were discussing about the Maldives government and the leadership of all the climate change activities. In fact, that I am currently supporting the Climate Vulnerable Forum presidency of the Bangladesh government, which was initiated by the Maldives government prior to the 2009 Conference of Parties, where the President Nasheed had led the Syrian presidency. And now so far we have come very far. Now, coming back to your question, I think that, infrastructural development for addressing climate change is solving only so much of the problem, because there has to be a long-term sustainable solution. And for that, we need to make the people adaptive and give them a solution that also supports their livelihood. That's why it's important to integrate climate change and mainstream that into the development process. What I tried to say is, there has to be livelihood opportunities which are already climate adaptive, because countries like Bangladesh, Maldives, Sri Lanka, these are always being hit by disasters. And so far, the intensity and the frequency is increasing at a rate that we can't already forecast. So, for example, if for example the culture of crab culture in southwest Bangladesh is now a very good practice because it has good import value, but it also sustains the salinity, which up to 50 ppt, because it is a saline prone area in southwest Bangladesh. And with that, the people are also engaged in the community ways to export and get a livelihood out of that. So things like this, also introducing financial technology, digital technology, and also agro-technology in these processes is very important by stakeholder approach of the government, the private sector, the development partners, etc. And I think what is also important is to share the best practices. I think we'll come down to discussion where we discuss about the South-South collaboration, but also sharing what works in one country and it learning effective in the wider region is also very important. So I'll stop there and I'll give it back to you for further discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sylvie, for giving us the context from Bangladesh and also drawing on the wider region. So finally, we move to Dr. Devnath. And Dr. Devnath, given your expertise on the technical or the technological side of global warming and climate change, what can countries located in the Bay of Bengal and the Indian Ocean do to adapt to global warming and a future climate crisis? Is there a way in which South Asia as a region can engineer a way out of such an upcoming crisis? So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Shahid. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this amazing discussion. First of all, I would like to say that I have been working on this energy emission decarbonization modeling for past 8 years, and I have developed models for Bangladesh, UK, Wales specifically, Nepal and Bhutan. And in my experience, it is possible for these countries, especially Bangladesh, Nepal and Bhutan, I can say with quantifiable numbers that it is possible for them to work with the climate change adaptation and mitigation strategies. But the outputs that we have seen, it clearly shows that the path towards decarbonizing the energy sector or adapting to with the social and technical side of the development side of the country together, it's a very uphill climb, and it is going to be very tough for the countries to work on its own to deal with this. So for example, we have seen that Bangladesh's energy security is highly dependent on gas-based electricity generation. And then we saw that the policy development that was actually influenced by JICA's planning, the PSMP 2016, it is directing that by 2041, Bangladesh will have about 60 gigawatt of power energy need. And they want to put that in their policies, this type of highly emissive coal-based power plants. So in a sense, Bangladesh is, as Ms. Sylvie said, that one of the lowest emitter, but in our projection, it shows that if Bangladesh keeps building this type of coal power plant generation, by 2050, Bangladesh will emit exactly the same, very close to the same amount of France in 2015. So these small emitters, like all the countries that we are targeting, apart from India, if you say Maldives or Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, or Bangladesh, these countries have direct impact of climate change, sea level rise, but also some of the country like India and Bangladesh are contributing to their own inundation here. And their policies are targeted towards a very rapid development of energy sector, but they're not looking in the what is going to happen, the aftermath of it. So for example, if you establish a coal power plant, if it's operational for 40 years, that means all the new coal power plants that are developed in Bangladesh in the past 5 to 10 years are going to be operational after even for 2040 or 50. So if you invest in that, you cannot just dismantle it. Bangladesh doesn't have the capacity to this type of huge shutting down the whole power plant and is still living with support from others. So these power plants are not going to be helpful on the future policies. But on the other hand, if you look at the development rate of Bangladesh, the amount of investment needed for energy needed for this type of development, Bangladesh is growing. I just saw yesterday the expected GDP growth for this year is going to be about more than 7%, which is huge just after the pandemic. And that shows that how much energy intensive manufacturing industry is in Bangladesh and how they need the energy. So we need the energy. But then again, how we are going to solve it, this is going to lay out the path of how in the future, our own adverse effects of climate change are actually going to be depending on us. So these are the catch-22 of energy, food security, and land development, and also social stuff that we are looking at. So I think it is possible, but it is not possible in just in one country's effort or one country's targeted effort towards a single objective. It has to be multi-objective. It has to be a large collaboration, because each country is not going to be able to implement something because they are connected. All the rivers in Bangladesh are connected to with India, Bhutan, Nepal, and in some cases China. So whatever is happening in those countries via the river is going to affect Bangladesh. On the other hand, if you look at how the sea level is rising, then again, the countries which are going to be affected by that, how they are going to deal with, sometimes it will have to be the neighboring country or the SARC itself will have to come into play. This is what I think that is going to happen. That's need to be happen, but how much is going to happen, that's the question. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Devnath, and yes, thank you for giving us that overview, and where certain policies probably can be implemented in a different way. So we'll of course talk more about that. But now we go on to our moderated discussion section, since our panelists have completed their overviews. And we have a few themes, including the economic impact of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, coping with climate change denialists, managing regional migration, and US policy in the region. So first to you, Dr. Vijay Singhe. So my question to you is, prior to the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Ukraine and Russia were the sources of import of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil to the South Asian region, and I'm sure to the rest of the world as well, many countries. So given the conflict has derailed exports from these two countries, Ukraine and Russia, coupled with the effects of climate change on agricultural production, food shortages, and rising food prices, which you mentioned, of course, in your opening remarks. What is the best way for Sri Lanka to navigate these issues? And can a source of solution be found by working more closely with neighboring SARC countries? Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Shahid. This is a short-term problem that demands fast actions, actually. First thing is, after the invasion, the wheat price and vegetable oil prices rallied up. Sri Lanka import about 42% of wheat from Ukraine and Russia. And those two, especially Ukraine, is a major source for sunflower oil. Right now, what is at Sri Lanka's disposal is to switch for alternative markets and go for alternative caloric sources. One thing is wheat can be readily substituted by rice to a certain extent. I meant you cannot make like food items using rice flour, but as a calorie source, rice can substitute wheat. Then Sri Lanka should try to import wheat from alternative markets like US, and also there should be a possibility to import them from India. However, there are two constraints right now for Sri Lanka to implement this strategy. One is lack of foreign reserves. Sri Lanka's foreign reserves is like 50 million USD about 1 week ago. 50 million. It's like a drastic shortage. In that case, Sri Lanka is right now in a discussion with IMF for a bailout. I think that negotiations should go forward, and we need to solve this reserve crisis to effectively face this challenge. Other constraint is domestic agricultural policies. As I said, this chemical fertilizer ban, right now it is removed, and I think this season the farmers will be able to purchase chemical fertilizers. Those kind of bad policies should not be repeated. Yes, cooperation with South Asian countries will help Sri Lanka a lot. One is the credit arrangements. As an example, Sri Lanka had a credit arrangement with India to import food items, medicine, and fuel. And there is a swap facility with Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka can explore the opportunity to access to food markets in especially India and Bangladesh. In that case, it would be ideal to remove export restrictions, and in Sri Lanka's side, remove these tariffs on food items, facilitating trade. And another thing is agriculture inputs. As an example, fertilizer, it is very pricey in the world market right now. Almost all the fertilizer sources, urea, MOP, and other stuff, they rallied up as a result of this Russian invasion. Sri Lanka can get assistance from maybe from India in that case. Long-run cooperation is also required for climate change mitigation and adaptation, especially technological sharing. India is a powerhouse in this area, so Sri Lanka can closely cooperate with India in these areas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vijay Singh. And I actually want to pose the same questions to Ms. Sylvie and Dr. Rashid. So Ms. Sylvie, can you tell us from the Bangladesh context? I mean, we know that food prices have gone up, and Ramadan happened, of course, recently, and during that time there is, of course, a rise in prices of certain essential goods. And during the same time, the Russian-Ukrainian conflict was also happening. So can you tell us from the Bangladesh context that what kind of solution or policies can be implemented in the SAARC context, working with neighboring South Asian countries? Thank you.
Yep, thanks a lot. And yes, I think with the current contextual realities, especially with the advent of the COVID pandemic, which also in Bangladesh was compounded by a problem, multitude of problem, including the population is so high, density is so much, and then there was an influx of the Rohingya refugees and all the realities that we are in at the moment. It is indeed a time that has to be taken forward with much urgency. And in terms of the policies that we have in place in Bangladesh, and also how we are, tackling the situation, is that at the moment we have certain a number of policies where we are not really looking at the problems from a one-dimensional view, but from a very large and comprehensive view. For example, if you look at the 8th five-year plan of Bangladesh from 2021 to 2025, the 8th five-year plan is actually critical to achieving the outcomes of vision, a long-term vision that we have, which is for the Vision 2041. And in terms of our actions to manage the delta, which is Bangladesh is a large delta country, and much of our population is based in these vulnerable regions. We have the Bangladesh Delta Plan 2100, as well as the Bangladesh Climate Change Strategy and Action Plan, as well as that Bangladesh is also working in the National Adaptation Plan map at the moment. So all these are actually running in two streams. For example, the world is running in the stream of the Paris Agreement and also the Sustainable Development Goals in parallel. So we need to actually make a convergence of all these policies to make sure the vulnerable communities at stake are much more benefited. So as well as these policies, one of the other things that I want to mention that has been led in the CBF presidency of the Bangladesh government is the Moji Climate Prosperity Plan. I was also, yes, I mean, further to my reference to the energy emissions on the emissions from countries like Bangladesh, definitely that, nano emissions make up a large chunk, but it is also important that we recognize this. For instance, that in the Glasgow Leaders Summit, our Honorable Prime Minister has declared that the Bangladesh is trying to address these problems, as it is one of the most extensive domestic solar energy programs we will be launching. And we hope to have, for example, 40% of the country's energy from renewables by 2041. Our Honorable Prime Minister has also said that 10 coal-based power plants have been cancelled, involving like $12 billion of foreign investment, due to our supplementing our efforts as in addition to adaptation to mitigation to address the impacts of climate change. Now, of course, migration is definitely a problem, because we just can't look at the push factor, but also we need to look at the pull factors, which eventually cause this migration. And with the Mujib Climate Prosperity Plan, we actually want to make the trajectory from vulnerability to resilience, and then resilience to prosperity. So we are trying to secure Bangladesh's prosperity within a decade, and it elongates until 2041. The plan is still in draft form. We will be publishing it when it is ready and approved. And in this plan, we also, since we're discussing about the policies, it is not a standalone new plan, but it also converges the existing plans that we have in Bangladesh to complement the development trajectories, including growth by maximizing the resilience in loss and damage financing, employment in green and climate resilient, and also low carbon, resource efficient, gender responsive economy, and as well as promoting well-being and traditional living to also take advantage of the 21st century technologies, together with inherently the sustainable and traditional lifestyle practices and living. And coming back to the infrastructure projects, and in line with that, how we are also addressing the mitigation is also through the Mujib Bangopsagar Independence Giga Array, which will be a 4 gigawatt wind and generation array network that will be linked to the mangrove green belt, which could also be one of the first large-scale hybrid readaptation infrastructure projects. We'll also be having some strategic energy hubs, which will be a strategic program of conversion of coal, oil, and diesel thermal power plants. So we're all, trying to think about these solutions, which are comprehensive enough to tackle adaptation, mitigation, and as well as think about loss and damage financing in the long run, to really take care of comprehensive policy implementation for the people who really need it. We need to talk about things happening in the ground and trying to make solutions which are really sustainable in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sylvie, for telling us some of the projects that are underway in the Bangladesh context. And Dr. Rashid, I mean, I have the same question for you for the Maldivian context. And I have actually been to the Maldives twice, and one of the things that fascinated me was that how the country has developed around tourism. And another thing was that how pretty much all the food, except for fish, perhaps, comes from neighboring countries or the rest of the world. And the same thing, I mean, with the Ukraine-Russia conflict, with food prices going up in the region, and what is the best way for Maldives to deal with it, according to your analysis, and what kind of solution can be found by working with neighboring SAARC countries? Or even, beyond, if we look at other smaller island nations, which Maldives a part of, is part of the Indian Ocean region. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for this. I think this is where we could also highlight how climate change, climate security is related to other issues and other challenges that we face globally. That's all interconnected, and we can't address climate change and also navigate this issue without considering the effects that, like you said, the global crisis, including health crisis or any other war that happens around the world, that kind of influences the factors that makes the climate threat or climate challenges worse in these countries. So we're talking about South Asian countries, as Dr. Vijay Singha and Ms. Sylvie also highlighted, that we are going through a phase where trying to get out of this COVID health crisis, which has affected as developing countries, South Asian countries a lot. I mean, dealing with the health crisis, then again, it kind of multiplies the challenges into economic and other social issues, and also the food crisis or food security that we deal with, along with climate security. So this is one factor that we deal with. And the other thing is that our dependency on international community, or maybe regional groupings, or maybe within South Asia, South Asian Cooperation, or SAARC. So these things have to be considered when we are dealing with individual issues, or maybe individual countries. So in the context of Maldives, I could go through some of the stages of better understanding how Maldivian government has put in place policies to make sure that the economies of scales are maintained and achieved in the face of climate challenges through development process. Like you have already highlighted, tourism plays an important part in the Maldives. So Maldives, for example, has a development potential because of tourism industry that has been developed since 1970s and 80s. So, but this industry is naturally challenged by the risk of high costs associated with managing infrastructure that is solely dependent on low-lying islands. So this is common to many other small island states as well. So idea of building reclaimed lands or islands is something very common in the Maldives for some time now. So this is something related to making sure that we have a strong tourism industry, as well as also supporting other economies, other communities that actually scatters across some 200 islands in the Maldives. So that means there's a risk of inundation that challenges this potential for sustainable development in the Maldives. So one of the long-standing effects of climate change is the loss of freshwater supplies and coral reef, which is something that supports the food system also in the Maldives. But then again, this also affects the whole infrastructure that supports the economic life of communities. So major concern lies with the potential loss of land. The islands are just about 2.4 meters above sea level, most less than this. And the global scientific predictions of its 0.5 meters rise by 2021, 2100, for example, puts the country at the risk of inundation. This is the basic narrative that the policymakers use to determine the policy solutions supporting development through the lens of climate change. So then again, there's the issue of protecting the land for the survival of the economic progress. This then again links to our commitment in international space, where we bring together ideas and also issues of other similar states, including small states. Starting with 1980s, the Maldives warned the international community of the life-threatening effects of climate change in low-lying island nations. In international advocacy has claimed an important part of international policy debate and exposed some of the most wicked and wildest threats of climate change. So with international cooperation supporting government's efforts, government started to focus on projects to move small populations to larger islands. But this is not a very popular or very appealing concept for local people, because it conflicts with their identities and cultures attached to the land that they live on. Then there's about movement of people. People have to be moved and people also move. There are other reasons for people moving in the Maldives, that is for achieving better economic life. So people have been moving to Male, the capital city, and Hulumale for some time. But Hulumale basically forms one of the important examples to explain the link between government policy and people's movement and climate security. It has created a reclaimed land that actually supports economic activity and also concentration of movement to urban areas. So development cooperation and our efforts to build climate security then again coincides with other issues within the region and also internationally that brings about the security concerns, and also more importantly, how geopolitical competition kind of comes into play when we engage with development partners, because development cooperation is something inevitable in countries like smaller states that depends on foreign support. So these issues have to be highlighted, as I think when we are trying to navigate issues within the region as well as in individual countries. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rashid, for giving us the viewpoint from the Maldives. And so now my question is to Dr. Devnath. Of course, you are an architect by profession. What kind of a unified global framework can scientists such as yourself develop to respond to climate change denialists? Is there a possibility for scientists to work with climate activists and policy experts, particularly those based in South Asia? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a very, very important topic. We can do a lot of research, and all the research academics or people here, I can see they are doing such a good work, but it is not going to be affected until we actually bring all the people involved who are affected or who are part of the society and on board. And this climate change denialists, they're always going to be there. You cannot take them to the 0% at all. You can have vaccine denialists after almost hundreds of years of using vaccine, still we have vaccine denialists. So it's really hard for not to like get the whole number down to 0%. But what we can do, as far as I can see, that best practice is to communicate with them as much as possible. So when we are doing research or when there is a step taken by the government or this type of climate migrations are happening, this type of effects are affecting some parts of the country, or in each country, there are people who are directly affected by climate change, and there are people who are not looking at that in that way. So the people who are directly affected by the climate change, even in them, there are climate change journalists who will say that it's not happening because of climate change. So the problem is not just on the broader population. Even the people who are affected by it needs to know that it is happening because of what. So the information delivery and awareness development is the key aspect in this case. Bangladesh is one of the best example of how family planning steps taken by the government and how awareness growing affected the whole country's perception in population growth control. And the same thing is applicable here. In Bangladesh, in Nepal, Bhutan, Maldives, or Sri Lanka, if you take the research in a much more easy to communicate version, very much direct to the people, they will listen. Whether they will take it in the first go or they will need a little bit of time to absorb the information, that depends on the context and the information, how complex it is. But definitely it is possible if we keep at it. We have to keep working on educating or informing the public, those are affected and not affected by it, so that they can develop the awareness around it. And if you make them aware, they will change the behavioral part of the change needed. A policy change is possible in the higher level, but in the grassroots level, you need the people to change their behavior. A lot of things depends on that. How you are using energy, how you are using your building, how you are using transport, everything is linked to climate change effects and how the emission is going to happen. So this is the first part of it. It is possible, but we have to keep constantly informing the public via as easy as possible information. It's not, the more we make it complex, the harder it will be to get them to it. Another part is the scientists are always have to work with the people who are working at grassroots level and policy making level, because we can estimate stuff, we can model frameworks, and we can test frameworks, and at the end of the day, after that, it will go from the research domain or academic domain to the industry or the application domain, where the people are there who are the direct beneficiary of that, but who are going to take it from research level to the public is the people who are working with policy, who are working with the people and in grassroots level. So social structure level, social care people, or even you name all the sectors, every sector is there. And I think that if we don't work with researchers and those sectoral peoples, it is not possible to build the bridge with the people, because the research, what is happening, it is dealing with numbers, it is dealing with context, it is dealing with multiple of factors that are very complex. But if you take that complexity and go to the public, it's easy for them to get lost. They don't need those things. They need a specific targeted solution or information that they can use. And this is the complexity and the I would say it's called a black box problem between the research and the public is happening, where the denialists gets the power because they are saying, I don't believe it because I can't see it. And this black box is very hard to break. It is only possible to breach that black box when the public sector people, the industry people, the sectoral people are bridging with people, the general public and the researchers, so that it becomes a flow of information from the research to the public, to the policy sector. And also it's vice versa, because the information and or the knowledge from the grassroots level has to also go to the researcher, because the researchers cannot just work in a secluded places, or they're just developing stuff and giving it to them. It doesn't go like that. It has to be, it's like a both way. It has to be a knowledge exchange, because the grassroots people also have so much knowledge that can help to generate very localized, low cost solutions that, for example, Ms. Sylvia was just saying about crab cultivation. If you look at the crab cultivation system, it's there. You just have to promote it as a means of that transition. And if you don't promote it there, the people who doesn't know are going to move to the capital or the big cities, and all the urban problems are going to get more acute. So these type of things, it has to go from both sides to get rid of the climate denialists. I think there may be other solutions. Thank you.
Well, that's always a challenge to take it from the policy side, where academics have worked on it, and then taking it to the grassroots. So, and thanks for pointing that out. And Dr. Vijay Singhe, actually, I want to ask about collaborations within economists, policy economists in the region in terms of climate change. And I know that your think tank, the Institute of Policy Studies based in Colombo, works with CPD, the Center for Policy Dialogue in Bangladesh, and Swati, the South Asia Watch on Trade, Economics, and Environment in Nepal. I know that you had a conference last year in the autumn, fall sometime. So I just wanted to know, in terms of climate change, what is what are the kind of collaborations going on in the policy economic policy domain, and within economists within your fraternity, what's actually going on?
Yes, actually, there are many institutes in the region. One important one is South Asian Network for Development and Environmental Economics. This is SANDI. Its objective is to bring together South Asian researchers and institutes interested in the overlapping areas of development, poverty, and environment. They also have research grants. So the groups of researchers can apply for them. As you said, there are regional think tanks, IPS, Saudi, Bangladesh, SANEM, we are collaborating, especially when there is a call for research by, let's say, ideas. Then they encourage for collaborations with the other think tanks in the region and maybe outside of the region. There are such collaborations among economists to conduct climate-related research. Recently, there was a huge conference organized by UNDP. We call it Colombo Green Dialogue. A lot of policymakers, researchers, they attended that, and it was like a brainstorming sessions, sharing the knowledge, and especially how to finance, green financing options available like that. So there are these kind of collaborations among the economists in the region.
Thank you, Dr. Vijay Singhe, for giving us an overview of how policy, economists were working with certain policies, how they collaborate, and what kind of institutions are out there. So now I actually move over to Ms. Sylvie, and South Asia has, of course, many climate-related issues. That's, of course, our topic. And of course, the coastal areas of Bangladesh are heavily affected. The rural to urban, migration is there. of course, and there's very high population density in Bangladesh in general, particularly in the cities such as Dhaka and Chittagong. And can you tell us, like, how can Bangladesh handle, this kind of crisis? I mean, you've already pointed out some kind of, some of the policies, but we wanted to know exactly about, the migration patterns that we've been noticing over the years, and how is the government and civil society bodies trying to handle that? Thank you.
Thank you, Tobe, for that question. I think, from the standpoint of, us talking from a regional perspective, first of all, I'll also elaborate from there, and then I can come back to Bangladesh and what we're doing. I am currently based in Global Center on Adaptation, an institution which has its regional office in South Asia, with its headquarters in the Netherlands. So from our office, what the perspective is to do is to take the best practices and solutions to have this office center for excellence for adaptation solutions across wider region. So even though the office is based in a certain country, it speaks for other countries and takes along the adversities and the vulnerabilities of these countries to work together. So this really is an example of creating a multi-stakeholder platform, I believe. As I said, that I'm supporting the Climate Vulnerable Forum presidency of the Bangladesh government, but today I speak as an independent researcher in my capacity of working in adaptation for a certain number of years. For example, earlier to my work in the CVF, I was in UNDP, where they have actually created such an example of how to make sure that these examples, for example, the multidimensional problems that we have, for example, poverty, migration, and joblessness in terms of, the realities like COVID, how to take this forward. So by the work of those programs, like Dr. Devnath has mentioned, that this has to be people-centric. After all, we're talking about policies, climate finance, but we are really talking about human beings who have emotions, who go through the losses and damages, who have turmoil that they have to face, and this trauma and the PTSD stays a long time right after the problem itself. So it's not really a quick solution in terms. That's why community participation, not during or after the project, but before the project, is very important. What are the needs that are needed? For example, there are certain barriers that we need to identify across the South Asia region, and it translates not just in Bangladesh. For example, there are economic barriers, the governance and policy barriers, the social and cultural barriers, market barriers, infrastructure barriers, and even capacity barriers. For example, information gap or political economy of adaptation. So each of these barriers can be handled by demands and supply, by a supply side actor, for example. So what I think is that for creating a comprehensive platform like that, we need to have a flow of information, ideas, flow of technology, flow of money, resources, goods and services, not just that's available in Bangladesh, but if my friend in Maldives or my friend in Sri Lanka has it, then there has to be a technology transfer in the government structure, the G2G structure, where these will be interoperable. So we talk about the interoperability between the ministries of the certain country, like for example, climate change is heavily gendered problem. So we are working with the Ministry of Women and Children Affairs, and also it is related to, we need to create financial independence for these vulnerable women. So we need to involve the finance ministry. So it has to be a very comprehensive view within the government system, but this just should not be, comprised within the country itself, but there should be, even like I said before as well, that there should be practices and sharing of ideas, information, resources within the network in the South region. I just want to give one example, which I think is very close to my heart, as I have already worked on it. Is the case of, creating a community empowerment through a very small initiative, which is environmental friendly, climate resilient, involves the vulnerable communities, has the potential to be solved with local solutions, is the case of an agrotech solution, which is climate resilient, and is also developing with the water technology solution. It's a case of a hydroponics, a very simple technology, which is which because Bangladesh is a land-hungry country, we are going for vertical vegetation, and because there is salinity problem, we also need water for growing these vegetables. So we install a rainwater harvesting system on top of the hydroponics, through which the water may trickle down, and then it can grow the desired vegetables. And when the women of these communities who are vulnerable, who are engaged in these communities, are also growing these vegetables, they are feeling empowered on themselves, and it is also addressing the market access problems, because they are now, for example, a woman in southwest Upazila, we call it the smallest unit of our country, doesn't have to be linked with the capital of Bangladesh. They can just come to the district level. That is good enough. So we are creating an access for them to develop and take their products to the market and then have an opinion, so that just the male member is not working. And this also gives the young children to actually go to their schools instead of fetching water to help their mothers. And also the water problem is very eminent in Bangladesh. I don't have to repeat that. I also want to focus on gender, disability, and ethnic minority inclusion in our approaches, because that is also important. Because we talk about, as I mentioned already, that these are heavily gendered problems, the climate change, especially because I've been working on it now for quite some time now. But also how to make sure that the coming youth of the next generation is also knowing that they have to do certain number of things to engage. So we need to create an enabling platform for the youth as well for addressing those problems. And finally, I think I want to take the example of the Bangladesh Climate Change Trust Fund, which has Bangladesh has established its own trust fund to tackle a couple of projects, especially in the southeast region, where Bangladesh is tackling climate change with its own resources. And similarly, it is giving an example to the wider world that despite having least resources, which we really it's a situation where we are geographically disadvantaged, but we are also trying to become a middle income country. But then again, that is a issue that where we will be also, I don't know, with the climate finance coming into the country, it's also going to be a big problem. But with that regard, still Bangladesh is trying best to tackle the climate change problem, so with the little resources it has. So I just call for wider, comprehensive, hand-in-hand cooperative approach by all the like-minded partners that we have in this region and across for South-South collaboration as well as North-South collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Sylvie, for telling us what's happening in terms of migration related to climate change, and also it is a gendered issue, as you can imagine. So, I mean, on that note, I would like to actually ask Dr. Debnath, a similar question, which is, you've been actually doing some field work, and besides Bangladesh, I know that you've been to Pondicherry a few months ago. And are they having the same kind of issues in terms of this rural to urban migration, and in different coastal areas in India, and the population density, of course, going up in certain parts and cities, and what can be done, like, as Ms. Sylvie talked about the Bangladesh context, maybe from the wider region, can you tell us, like, maybe certain policies that others have implemented better, or Bangladesh has implemented better, that, each other we can learn from?
I went to South India, and we have, it's interesting, the effect of extreme climate. When you see it, it makes it more relatable, because when you were in the northern part, and the extreme temperatures and the effects of it, it's not severe. But when at the same day, if you take a flight and just go to south, it's like you are in a oven. It's so warm. And what we in my personal observation, I didn't have the time to look at the migration pattern itself, but we were looking at extreme climate effects on the energy demand of buildings, because people were starting to use ACs more frequently. And now the extreme heat is so extensive that it crosses all the records in past years. In south of India, we went to Oroville a couple of last year, and it was a place where we saw that communities which just 5 years ago didn't had much ACs, now they are starting to get ACs in the home. So this is going to start a new type of energy demand, which is induced by the climate change effects. So this type of things now seems like very small, because only the families or the people who can afford it are using it. But the estimate shows that by 2050, India will have about more than 1 billion ACs. Right now, in 2017, they had only 8% of the households AC. So if you compare that with China and USA, it's very, very little, being a very hot and very so much diverse climatic context there. And most of them are in a position of affected by the extreme heat. In Bangladesh, same, if you go to Dhaka, sometimes some areas we measured in a summer, some areas in Dhaka easily goes beyond 45 when the collective temperature is not as high. So these heat island effects are happening everywhere in Dhaka. So these type of things are happening, and the extreme weather effects are affecting the people more and more. And gradually, there is nothing going down. It's just next year is the worse than the year after, year before. So it is going to go in that way for quite a long time, because the effects that are going to be the result of this climate change is going to be consistent, and it is going to go bad and bad. We have to deal with the migration, as Ms. Sylvia was talking about, or Dr. Roshida and Dr. Wasinghe was talking about, that these effects are severe, and in each country they're showing some localized different effects. Because when we go to Nepal and Bhutan, the effects are not the same. They are also having the same climate change effect, but they're having in a different way, because they're in a high altitude and all the rivers flow from there. When in summer the temperature is going so high, what is happening, that the flow of water is so high that they're producing a lot of hydropower. But in the winter, it goes down drastically. So at that time, sometimes they have to actually rely on import of energy. And these type of things are happening, affecting all around that region. We were talking about the frameworks that we can develop for regional purpose. Our study has shown that Bangladesh, rather than going into coal power generation, Bangladesh's potential of solar is medium. It's not high. If you go and put a lot of solar panels, Bangladesh can produce some energy, but where are you going to store them? The biggest problem of a solar power or renewable is intermittency. When you need them at night, you can't have them. So the problem is still there, because the storage problem is there. And the storage problem is not solved yet in anywhere in the world in large scale. Small scale is possible, but we're talking about a country which is going to consume, our estimate shows that about 135 terawatt hours by 2040, 2050. So this is a huge energy demand, and it's going to govern by domestic energy demand, which gets in peak at night. So the rivers that are coming down from Nepal and Bhutan has a huge hydroelectric potential. And Nepal and Bhutan are almost 100% hydroelectric and like renewable energy based. So as a region, if they think Bangladesh can actually get help from Nepal and Bhutan, which they are already investing in a very small scale, but rather than investing in coal power plants and very specific renewable generation projects, which are hugely expensive for Bangladesh, these fundings are going to put Bangladesh into a huge debt. And already we are seeing the mega projects are going to start to repayment will start very soon. And we'll start to see the effect of these repayments very soon. All the mega infrastructure mega projects and the energy mega projects have been done. So regional collaboration is more effective, in my view, than putting into such a large type of projects that has a higher chance of failure. But regional projects also between India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal will have to go through a lot of political goodwill, policy-based development. They have to deal with geopolitical issues, dependency on other countries for energy. But if you are putting coal power plants which are run on imported energy, then you can, again, you are putting yourself into the same situation. You are depending on coal, which is coming from another country. So this type of situations can actually help Bangladesh to have a decarbonized energy generation with the help of the region, not by itself. And that can also help India, it can help Nepal, it can help Bhutan. So regional collaboration has to go through in the first priority, because each of the countries, Nepal and Bhutan, can hugely benefit by the seaports that Bangladesh has, or the river system that Bangladesh has. So Bangladesh can help, has the same thing. Bangladesh is very flat. You cannot have more hydropower. The hydro potential of Bangladesh is very low. But look at Nepal and Bhutan, the amount of hydropower potential they have. If we can tap that, it can help to become a decarbonized energy sector in Bangladesh, as well as Bhutan is a carbon negative country. But Bhutan can act as a carbon sink for the region. If you think like that, then you don't have to put more and more trees in every corner. You will have to put it for the urban development of urban climate. But think like the whole region. If you think like a whole region, then a collective effort of developing this type of carbon sinks is more effective, rather than each and every small country is trying to find some land. Some countries may not find that land. If you try to make a forest in Rajasthan, it's not going to be a feasible project. But maybe if you go in the east, in India, they have more potential of green carbon sink there. So I went into many directions, but my point is that regional collaboration is possible, and I think it has the more potential than depending on very low high hanging fruit. I would say that those are hard to reach. We are going to spend a lot of money on them, but that will also make our energy sector more vulnerable. And regionally, we can solve it in a much more better way. We just need the collaboration and the goodwill. The funding can be transferred from those to these. So yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you, Dr. Devnath, that, there is so much potential for the region. That's also something good, that, there is some hope ahead. And you touched on geopolitics. And of course, in this panel, we have Dr. Rashid. He worked for many years with the Maldivian government, and he's now doing his second PhD, for all those who don't know. And his first PhD was on geopolitics. Now it's on climate change. So Dr. Rashid, we have to ask you this. The US, China, and India are among the top carbon emitters, while the Maldives is, one of those countries that's, affected a lot. And during bilateral talks, how does the Maldives discuss the issue of climate change with all these, especially these three countries that I just mentioned to you? And how about during bilateral talks with other South Asian countries, especially Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, which are also affected because it has it's going to be affected or is being affected by rising sea level? And how high is the issue of climate change at the top of the agenda for the Maldives, and how much, in terms of talking bilaterally or multilaterally, how much is that being focused on?
Thank you. Yes, for sure, climate change and climate, the topic is at the forefront of its foreign policy and as well as any national development policy. So that also, before I go to the international space, I would want to also pick from what Dr. Devnath also mentioned about collaboration between the countries that could share knowledge as well as resources and also technical support. This is a very important point, and I work around collaboration in transition process to efficient ways. I mean, this is one of the key problems that we face in local communities, and also connecting, again, going back to your point, connecting science to the people who actually have to own the practices that actually makes them adaptive and also builds their capacity and resilience. So this is going to the second part of your question about collaboration in SAARC, or maybe South Asian groups, or the family we call family, because we work very closely within the political and also the economic space in South Asia amongst the South Asian countries. So then means that we take individual and also collective leadership. As a small state, in a small island state, Modi has taken a collective as well as individual leadership to talk about this and also build international policy and reflect that on the scientific findings, and also then create international policy to support adaptation in individual countries, especially in developing countries. This is the same in South Asian countries as well, because we can't alone support and build our adaptive capacity without the support of development cooperation. But then again, there's South-South cooperation that would very much be supported and also complemented by what Devnath had mentioned about collaboration, the collaborative effort that we have to kind of involve in our policy. When we look at individual policy, we have to also coordinate with the other countries that are closely kind of connected with the same ideas and also some same challenges. So that is exchanging knowledge, exchanging, transferring technologies, and also exchanging resources. Then going back to your first question about the geopolitics and also involving the larger states and also engaging with them in the bilateral context. I have to mention that to highlight that development cooperation on climate action in the Maldives has very much been centered on international policy space, that is mostly on UN climate process. So as for the bilateral engagements, as small developing states, the Maldives has welcomed and resorted to bilateral aid for development, apart from international donor programs. So this was evident and also seen, particularly during COVID-19. The Maldives got a lot of support from bilateral aid and partners directly and through their international programs. So this is a noteworthy fact that actually also explain how we are connected to the development cooperation programs. So looking at these countries, for example, US, India, and China. So starting with US, the Maldives has had a long-standing development cooperation agenda with the US as one supporting development, including institutional as well as human development efforts. So bilaterally speaking, the US commitment to climate action may be different to their international engagements. Bilaterally, the engagements will very much reflect the mutual interests of the Maldives and the US. So apart from the broader development cooperation, the US has bilateral engagements with the Maldives in the climate action space. For example, this year, the US Agency for International Development, USAID, launched $10.5 million US 5-year climate adaptation project for the Maldives. And likewise, India India is the closest and oldest development partner of the Maldives. So apart from development cooperation, India and Maldives share neighborly relations like any other South Asian country, and also cultural connections. So we are neighbors as well as friends in other than the strategic relationships that we hold. So in terms of climate security and development, Maldives has benefited from India's continued aid and investment projects. So this reflects on our bilateral talks as well as our engagement with them in bilateral as well as multilateral spaces. For example, the renewable energy project to complement the Maldives net zero emission target for 2030 is noteworthy. Another one is the water supply and storage system project in some 34 islands, one of the largest projects supporting climate resilience in the Maldives. So India provides cooperation to strengthen maritime security as well as disaster risk management, which are important areas for climate security. While on the other hand, Maldives has close diplomatic ties with China. The Maldives has seen an increase of China's investments during 2013 and 2018. So the Maldives China Development Cooperation initiatives have helped build infrastructure on our island populations and island economies. This include building, for example, a bridge connecting the capital island, International Airport Island, and the second largest residential island. This also includes building reclaimed land in these lands. So this also contributes to climate security. Other than this, such bilateral cooperation will contribute to its efforts and climate negotiations at international level. This is partly and also solely proved by the collective efforts of the small island developing states in international negotiations to bring the idea of and the concept of the existential threat to the forefront of international climate debate. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And we will ask Dr. Vijay Singhe about the economic side of things. And is there a sort of organizational structure the international community can fund to respond to the economic effects of climate change in the global South? Can the establishment of more global or South Asian regional organizations help to respond more effectively to the economic effects in localized contexts, for example, in the case of Sri Lanka?
Yes, actually, this climate infrastructure and for building resilience is a very, it requires a high budget. As an example, 2019 World Bank study shows that about 19 trillion USD in the world. The good news is these investments have a high return. As an example, 1 billion investment may have about 4 billion return. Organization structure, one important thing is the Sustainable Development Goals. In Sustainable Development Goal 13 identifies United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change is as the primary international intergovernmental forum for negotiating climate global response to climate change. When you talk on financing, the most important fund is Green Climate Fund. It is established under this Paris agreement. The task's objective is to deliver nationally determined contributions. These are called as the NDCs. These are national commitments in climate change adaptation and mitigation. So this fund mandated to support developing countries raise and realize their NDCs. They are doing investing across 4 transitions: built environment, energy and industry, human security and livelihood, and well-being. There is another, this multilateral institutes like World Bank also has technical supports. As an example, Sri Lanka signed an agreement in 2021 with the World Bank. The project worth about 92 million. The objective is to finance agreement financing for a project in building climate resilience. It's a multi-phased program. Phase 1 project is about 92 million. There are regional organizations. These are not much strong yet in a nascent state, but the good news is we see a SAC climate action plan and the commitment from the SAC governments for this climate change resilience. However, my point is, rather than building new organizations, it will be more effective to increase the role of the existing infrastructure, organizational infrastructure. We have a lot of stuff in the region like SAC. It is a bit inactive. We need to revive that, and the countries should contribute to these organizational commitments. Regional fund may solve a lot of issues, especially the localized issues, but there will be a financing constraint because we don't have much rich countries in the region to contribute to such ambitious fund. So I think the region will have to rely on these multilateral institutes like World Bank and the ambitious new funds like Green Climate Fund. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Vijay Singh. And now we're almost at the end of the program. So for the ending round, we have a 2-part question. And my question is that is there a potential of a regional energy cooperation in South Asia for decarbonizing the energy sector, such as through the SARC framework? We've been talking about the SARC quite a bit. And also, what would be a marker for optimism as we move ahead? So first to Dr. Devnath, then Dr. Rashid, then Dr. Vijay Singh, and then Ms. Sylvie. So over to you now, Dr. Devnath.
Definitely there is hope. I am a hopeful, optimistic person, and I hope that there is going to be more regional collaboration, not just for energy, for food, migration, and everything. Because as a country, the growth will be much more slower if you're compared to a region. The region can develop faster, and the return of this type of collaboration would be much higher if we are collaborating apart from just geopolitical tension and everything. If we can collaborate, that would be the best solution. In terms of energy regional collaboration, our study shows that it is possible. It needs a lot of goodwill and policy reformation, and also communication between the governments. We have looked into regional collaboration in terms of energy between India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan, which showed that it has a huge potential to decarbonize each other's energy sector, as well as it can impact the positive development in environmental sector. In terms of Sri Lanka, Maldives, or Pakistan, they also have a potential of different types of energy generations, and they have the energy generation potential that are much more lower in Bangladesh and Nepal and Bhutan. They have wave and tidal and deep offshore solar offshore wind potential that are much lower in other countries. So if the region works as a collective entity, I think one can support other, and that way the whole region can be decarbonized if we can try. It's not, I haven't done the calculation, but I am hopeful because the part of the calculation between 4 countries shows very good potential. So in my views, it is possible and it has a high potential of solving the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Rashid.
Yes, thank you. I think I also agree totally with Dr. Devnath on that aspect of collaboration. And so there's hope and also there's the potential. So but I think one way to focus on this is to focus on the structures put in place, for example, governance structures. I think when you look at science and policy, there's also a space where the mechanisms have to be effective within countries as well as between countries when you try to implement these projects, energy efficiency or other types of adaptation mechanisms. So yes, I totally agree, and yes, there are knowledge and as well as technical expertise that we could share between countries, and South Asia provides that space where countries can cooperate and work in a collaborative mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Vijay Singh.
Thanks. I agree. There is a potential as I perceive that, especially technically, there will be a possibility for connecting to the same grid in the subcontinent. India has an ambitious plan in this initiative. This direction, I think it is named as Green Grid Initiative, One Sun, One World, and One Grid Initiative. Those things are positive signs for collaboration in future. There is a potential to share this renewable technology between the countries. That's most important because some countries in the region, they do not have the required technology. There are constraints too. As an example, India had this local content requirement for solar panels. That means when there are investments, that certain technology and items should come from the domestic production. That is not good for competitiveness, and they impede the investments from the other countries. So I think US brought that to the WTO tribunal, and they ruled against India. So these kind of things are going on. You know, it is politics, protectionist politics are existing still in the region. Even in Sri Lanka, it is the case. So it will be ideal for opening up these industries to the world, and we can learn a lot from APEC countries. They have a list of environmental goods. They have remote tariffs, so they can trade between the countries. So those are the constraints we should focus in potential sharing of energy in future. Thank you.
Thank you. And Miss Sylvie?
Thank you so much. And as we're coming to an end, I'd like to really appreciate you having me with all the esteemed speakers. You have learned so much. And because we're moving on to an optimistic note, as you put it, as a marker of optimism, I think that's a really nice term to really look forward into the coming decades, which really is sometimes daunts me. But we really, you mean taking from the aspect of the presidency that I'm supporting, the notion of taking vulnerability to resilience, and resilience to prosperity gives up a lot of hope, I think, because we also need to see the good things that we are doing and get inspired with what can be further done. So in terms of the other other part of your question, which you mentioned about having a consortium sort of to take on the um, mutually beneficial ways to work together with economic transition and financing analysis, maybe for dedicated financing mechanism for South-South support and international collaboration, as well as promoting global ambition and action. I think I just want to mention of the climate prosperity plans, which has been initiated by the Bangladesh presidency of the CVF, which has built to expand the finance mobilization across a range of countries which are climate vulnerable. And if you look at the 55 countries that are under the CVF banner, they're all vulnerable to climate change, but they all have a potential to use, each other's forces to have more South-South collaboration and wider so. So with the CPPs, I think it can be a great tool for infrastructure and economic programs to promote both robust socio-economic progress and reduce emissions, and as well as building greater climate and disaster resilience, as well as safeguarding the progress that we have for the SDGs. So for instance, for Bangladesh, that we are boosting green growth through maximum resilience and also delivering energy independence, trying to at least contribute for net green exports, as well as strengthening the employment in a green economy. For example, the instances I've given that can also contribute to lessening the migration problems and so on and so forth, as well as promoting well-being and traditional living. So I think these are the things that we can really exchange and share ideas with each other, and also take forward the common problems towards a very optimistic notion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Sylvie. So now, as we close, I would like to begin by thanking our guests who have set aside time and have joined us from various parts of the globe to share their expertise. So Dr. Ataullah Rashid, doctoral researcher, Australian National University. Thank you. Dr. Asanka Wijisinghe, Research Fellow, Institute of Policy Studies, Colombo. Thank you. Ms. Sirzum Munira Sylvie, Program Officer, Climate Vulnerability Program in Dhaka. And of course, Dr. Kumar Biswajit Debnath, Research Associate, Hub for Biotechnology in Built Environment, Newcastle University in the UK. So thank you to you all for joining us. And then I would also like to thank Dr. Irfan Nuruddin, Senior Director of the South Asia Center, Mr. Haris Samad, the Assistant Director of the South Asia Center, and Ms. Misha Iqbal, Program Assistant of the South Asia Center, and of course the entire team for organizing this webinar. I would like to add that to get updated on the geopolitics of South Asia, including climate change, of course, we invite all our viewers to check out the South Asia Center's website, which has many commentaries and briefs on the region, as well as yearly and mid-yearly reviews on the different countries of the region. Do check that out. And finally, thanks to our audience based in the US, the UK, South Asia, and all the way to Australia, and possibly other places around the world, for patiently listening to us. And take care and be safe. Thank you.